How does Christian fundamentalism and their ideology encourage hate crimes? We have to look at what kind of people are targeted according to the federal laws that identify and kind of meet the criteria for hate crimes. It's the same groups. When you look at employment, what groups of people cannot a potential employer discriminate against? Those are the groups that identify as hate crimes. People who have disabilities, gender, orientation, sexual identity, race, political affiliations. You cannot discriminate against people for something they cannot help, something that they were born with or came to realize that they are. Maybe they changed religions due to life circumstances or marriage. You cannot discriminate against people. Any of those groups that you target based on your ideology or what your God wrote in a book, if you target people who cannot change and shouldn't change who they are, that's baked into their biology, their bodily systems, their identity. If you teach hate and that they are lesser than or that they're predators, that is a hate crime. Not all hate crimes have to be physical action. Tweeting that trans people are not women is hateful ideology. Telling people that something needs to be done about gay people, and you hint in your vocabulary that something needs to be done, not in a peaceful way, is inciting hate crimes. When you look at the vast majority of people who do hate crimes, according to the FBI, 75%, 3 out of 4 hate crimes or violent mass shootings, mass murder, 3 out of 4 are done by cis, heterosexual, white men of privilege. Usually these men are right-winged, ideology-believing, Trump-loving, Ku Klux Klan-loving individuals. People like Timothy McVeigh. And, oh dear, you look at all the shootings. I am shocked when it's not a cis, heterosexual white man. And I'm not saying that trans people and black people and Asians and women never do shootings. That would be a lie. But when less than 5% of mass shooters identify as something besides their cis gender, that does not mean that trans people are prevalent shooters. You look at gender. 95% of mass shootings and hate crimes are done by cis men. Cis means the men identify as what their genitals and birth gender says they are. Less than 5% are by people who identify as not the cis of their birth, specifically trans people, pre or post-op. But instead of going after the group, the cis heterosexual white men who make up the 95% of perpetrators, Trump thinks it's going to make a dent to go after the 5%, the trans people. 95%, 5%. Which group do you think, if you crack down on and create laws that protect potential victims, which group of people do you think is going to make the biggest ripple in the statistics? Not the 5% group. But still, Republican, conservative people of religion will go after the 5% that won't even make a ripple in the pond of statistics for violent hate crimes. So how does fundamentalist Christianity and most religions create an environment that increases the odds of hate crimes? Well, most monotheistic, male-created, founded, controlled religions that surround a monotheistic male god see anything that isn't traditional, hyper, alpha toxic masculinity as something that should be controlled, owned, married, and subdued. Or killed, depending on what country you're in. When you have and adhere to biblical manhood, which can become extremely toxic and dangerous for women, you create a situation that anyone that doesn't resemble Andrew Tate as a threat, that a lot of people are now acting out in violence. That's terrible. Let people be who they are, as long as their sexual preference is for people 18 or older who consensually want to be with them, or people who don't want a traditional relationship or a different type of relationship, or don't want a relationship at all, the asexual and aromantic people. Accept, tolerate, and embrace and celebrate different types of people. Sexual orientation is similar to ethnicities. There's so many types of people, but they're all people. We should celebrate people's differences, and as long as teenagers are interested in pursuing teenagers who want them, and adults pursuing adults who like them back, who cares who you're into? Who cares? Just don't choose people that have existing partners to hurt people. That's why cheating is wrong. It's removing consent from existing partners. Polyamorous people, perfectly fine. Just be ethical. Be kind. As long as our society and religions support and worship the nuclear, heterosexual, male-controlled fantasy that you can only believe when you're asleep, dreaming, this is going to create the toxic masculinity that causes hate crimes. That's why gay people and trans people are targeted. They're seen as a threat for daring to not conform to toxic, biblical, and secular expectations of alpha masculinity. And a lot of people, over 2,000 non-straight people a year, are killed because hyper, alpha, toxic, masculine men who adhere to the biblical or secular toxic expectation of alpha masculinity cannot handle a different kind of person, usually a man who exudes healthy, green flag, more feminine traits. If men respected and valued femininity to the same extent they value healthy and green flag masculinity, or even more than that, we would have no sexism, no homophobia, no hate crimes. We would see each other as equals and as a blessed asset. There are pastors, you can Google them, go on YouTube, that call for the death of people who don't adhere to masculine gender and orientation expectations. And if you don't know about hate crimes, look it up. In a few episodes, we're going to be talking about the most infamous hate crime in American history, or at least the one in the 20th century. The two that caused a federal hate crime prevention act to be established. Instead of talking about Matthew Shepard, I want to talk about a different kind of hate crime. Probably the most popular niche within hate crimes. We're going to talk about racially profiled hate crimes. And yes, we're not going to talk about ICE in this video. But if you want a modern 2026 version of a hate crime, look at ICE. They target people who are usually not white based on racial, gender, accent, clothing, stereotypical choices and behavior of non-white people. That is a hate crime. Hate crimes do not have to be physical acts. They can be erasure of groups of people, villainizing in ethnicity, calling Indians savages is a ethical hate crime, or as I call it, an unethical hate crime. Viewing gay people as predators or AIDS as a gay disease is an intellectual hate crime. Not all hate crimes have to be physical blows or murder. The most common type of hate crime is erasure, queerbaiting, villainizing, and creating the view that anyone who isn't a man or a woman of heterosexual origin is a predator is an intellectual hate crime. Making media that purposefully does not give correct representation and makes people hope and expect a positive outcome is queerbaiting to make money. That is terrible. You are teaching the next generation of non-heterosexual people that their desires, wants, feelings, and life and safety and rights are not as important, or even worse, should be sacrificed to uphold a straight couple and a straight fantasy. The most famous niche within hate crimes is racially motivated violence. I can't think of any act more racially motivated than a lynching. Ironically, the reason why that was signed as a prevention by the president at the time was because of a book. If you've ever heard of the Turner Diaries, written by William Luther Pierce, written under the pseudonym Andrew MacDonald, was not a traditional preacher. He did establish a pseudo-religious entity to serve his political agenda. I watched a YouTube video where his son gave a tour of the compound in which his father, the author of that book, was one of the most wanted people of the FBI. And if you've never heard of the Turner Diaries, I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. It is as controversial as Mein Kampf or the Communist Manifesto. The Turner Diaries is basically the white supremacist Bible for hate crimes. And it's not an easy read. I don't know of any book more racist and dehumanizing against non-white people or non-white men in existence. According to the National Alliance Organization, the single most dangerous organized hate group in the United States, largely as a result of Pierce's authority of the Turner Diaries. America's most important neo-Nazi. Why is the Turner Diaries so bad? Well, it's kind of like Catcher in the Rye. It's one of those books that when unhinged people, by unhinged, I mean religious or secular racial extremists read it, they get good ideas to hurt people, which is terrible. There have been so many crimes based on the Turner Diaries. It is not rumored, but has actually been proven that when Timothy McVeigh exploded the Oklahoma City Federal Building, it was because of something in the Turner Diaries. The January 6th insurrection of Trump's followers was influenced by a specific passage in the Turner Diaries. The murder and lynching of the famous African-American citizen, James Byrd Jr., was instigated by people who wanted to recreate passages in the Turner Diaries. Why is this important? Because it is. If you do a simple Google search, the Turner Diaries, the 1978 neo-Nazi novel by William Luther Pierce, has estimated to have influenced the perpetrators of over 200 terrorist killings. The book is widely considered a fundamental text to far-right extremism, linked to over 40 terrorist attacks and hate crimes since the 1980s. Some that were influenced by the book was the Oklahoma City bombing, 1995. The most notable act of violence inspired by the book killed 168 people. The worst act of terrorism on U.S. soil until 6 months after his execution, 9/11 happened. The Order, the 1980s, the white supremacist group, inspired by the novel. They were responsible for crimes including the 1984 assassination of Alan Berg. The Day of the Ropes. The book popularized the Day of the Rope concept, a mass execution of race traitors, which have been cited in numerous violent attacks. The 2019 Poway synagogue shooting and the 2023 Jacksonville, Florida Dollar General murders. The book has been linked to at least 22 bank robberies by the Aryan Republican Army, the 1998 murder of James Byrd Jr. in Texas, and the bombings in London in 1999. The novel's influence extends internationally, with the ties to the 2011 northern attacks of Anders, and I'm going to spell the last name because I don't want to mispronounce it, Breivik, and the National Socialist Underground in Germany. A report from the Counter-Extremist Project identified 44 individuals or groups whose violent actions, including murder, domestic terrorism, and robbery, were directly or indirectly influenced by this book. Now, I don't believe in banning books. I don't believe that books have the power to make people do anything. People do bad things. Guns do not hurt people. It's the people who use them. And yeah, the January 6th insurrection was based on the Turner Diaries. I want to talk about James Byrd Jr. Another episode, we'll talk about Matthew Shepard. Because with Matthew Shepard, I want to talk about how the Westboro Baptist Church and Christianity used an unfortunate tragedy to further their religious bigotry. But today we're going to focus on James Byrd Jr.